First, I just wanted to talk about certain other things before I get into other types of videos. But let's talk about fucked up animated shows that I grew up on. Exosquad. And believe me, this show was more fucked up. But let's start at the beginning. As you know, Hanna-Barbera had a lot of shows in the 1970s, a few of them in prime time. This was a quick pick of mine. But anyways, Hanna-Barbera had a few shows that were in the prime time schedule, meaning they were the same time that what Friends would have been on. And these each one of these programs, I don't know about the Top Cat one, but we're doing really well in the prime time slots. And Hanna-Barbera and a lot of other animated shows also were doing well in the prime time slots until this happened. Well, actually, in fact, there was a couple of things that ruined everything for Hanna-Barbera and a lot of animated shows. First was Thunder the Barbarian being put into the Saturday morning slot, but there was nothing new to this. Hanna-Barbera had a bunch of shows that were shown in Saturday morning, but this was also the start of the 1980s and the Satanic Panic. And if you haven't seen the last seasons of Stranger Things, that basically explains that the Satanic Panic was a bunch of evangelical nutjobs who basically started to say that everything that teenagers and little kids were doing was basically connected to Lucifer somehow. But in the end, and technically, that this show should not have existed at all, but somehow it did, and not one parent group complained about it at all. I mean, let me explain. FCC back in the 80s and then later in the 90s put up a bizarre, well, first in the 80s, they put up a series of laws, or under a certain president, saying, Saturday morning cartoons had to be less violent and more for children by allowing them to bypass them if certain major companies and toy companies were a part of it. But then the 90s came around and, well, let's just say censorship got a lot more harder. Now, we got lucky three times with Batman the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, and of course, Exosquad. But Exosquad was the most fucked up of all the shows. Starting off with genetically engineered blue people with no testicles, or any kind of reproduction organ, meaning the image that you see before there, it is a Neo Sapien, butt ass naked, and seen at the opening credits of almost every Exosquad show for children. And adding to the wonderful genius gene pool of stupidity is this wonderful dumbass, Captain Marcus. First, he ends up trying to court martial his lead pilot, or the best pilot of all of Exofleet, and then does nothing in the second part of the story of the first season, only to commit mutiny, attack an enemy who is more well armed and well equipped, and then tries to get out of his fucking mistake by committing suicide. He never made it to season 2. And then there's everything that happened to this unfortunate woman. Don't worry, she lives. But, all the shit that happens to her. I mean, first she goes home to Venus in season 1 and finds her parents living mindly in their living room of what used to be their house about 6 feet under, because her little brother was basically forced to bury them on his own. And then in season 2, she watches her little brother get killed. Or just get crushed to death by an E-frame. Every older sister's dream come true for their little brother, I guess. And then later she gets injected with alien DNA, gains superpowers, and kills the main villain. And then in season 2, episode 13, there's this wonderful little blob. Well, actually, in episode 12, Neo Omega was injected with an experimental thing, and so they bring him on board a small little ship. And episode 13 of season 2 becomes like a horror episode where he basically just runs around and kills like 6 people on a ship before he's finally destroyed by a nuclear explosion or fusion explosion on the ship. Suffocates people to death, and some people got blown out airlocks. I mean, look at her. Doesn't she look all giddy and happy knowing she's gonna die? And then this happens.
Then Galba alone shall be spared.
The show was created by Jeff Segal, who was also the president of Universal Animation Studios at the time. But the real bread and butter was the two writers, or the two brothers, the Edison brothers. One of them, Michael Edison, who sadly passed away from cancer not that long ago. But let's just say him and his brothers were huge fans of another large mecha show that was mostly made in Japan. Now, I can't tell you how they learned about the whole Gundam series before Gundam was even introduced here in the 2000s here in the US, but somehow the Edison brothers knew about this show and decided to put pretty much almost the same formula that happens in Gundam, but also happening in Exosquad. Basically, give a makeup pilots. Have your mecha pilots have extremely complicated lives, and then give them fucked up scenarios to get out of. Say, like a Gundam pilot accidentally gets their father killed, and in Exosquad, Nera Burns kind of accidentally gets her brother killed by belittling them for not going after a friend of hers when he was kidnapped. It's they're extremely different, but you could see the kind of similarities that they did use there. Make these characters more human, basically by giving them character traits and flaws. Basically by screwing up, saying like JT Marsh, all he wants to do is the leader of the Alpha Squad. All he wants to do is send all of his team members home alive. But as soon as somebody he knew under his command, Alistair Rady, dies in an accident, that's pretty much it for that. Now he's just trying to survive the war. The key difference, give your characters flaws. Make them flawed. Make them screw up every once in a while. And that's exactly what they did. And then Universal came along, canceled the entire series, and only season 1 was put on DVD, but season 2 used to be on Hulu, but then it was removed and it was on fuck you, we're not showing you shit, until it was finally on Peacock. The only way to see season 2 is on Peacock, one of the worst streaming services ever fucking made. But then things get a lot more worse when a man who many of you have played, if you played Battletech, you know who this guy, Jordan Wiseman, who basically tried to sue the living shit out of Playmates, claiming that Playmates created the whole thing to get back at him. Let me explain. See, they were planning on making, or the Battletech with Jordan Wiseman were planning on making an animated series for Battletech, which would later come out in '94. It was actually supposed to come out in the early '80s. But anyways, they asked Playmates to make toys for the upcoming TV show, and of course Playmates demoed the whole thing out. But then for some reason, Wiseman and FASA, I think is what their name is. I'm not much of a tabletop guy, so you have to bear with me. Just canceled the whole deal with Playmates. And then all of a sudden, when Playmates makes their deal with Universal to make, action figures for their TV show, because Universal Animated Studio owns the entire rights to Exosquad, Jordan Wiseman and FASA ends up suing the shit out of Playmates, really with just unjustified bullshit. I don't want to get into details, but basically they lost the case. But then Universal ends up canceling the show and ends up trying to make a deal with FASA, which does not work out for them in the end, because then FASA just ends the deal with Universal. And with no explanations to why. And if anybody knows the history of FASA, things didn't work out for them in the end. And they got their living shit sued out of them by Harmony Gold, who was the owners of the Robotech franchise. And of course, we all know what happened to Harmony Gold because Big West came in and with the whole Macross stuff. It was just one giant clusterfuck after another. And Exosquad was just there. And then things get even more weirder, like when Universal okayed the reboot of Exosquad, right at the same time when Voltron Legendary Defender was also okayed and put on Netflix. And then there was the merger of Universal Animation just into DreamWorks. Basically, Universal Animation is gone, and DreamWorks is left. Now they're the owners, and well, the whole thing was canceled, and with Exosquad, and apparently it was also canceled right at the same time when when a lot of fans of the Voltron Legendary Defenders was saying the writing just got piss poor. And I'll leave that to other people to find out. But my best guess to why they ended up completing Voltron and canceling the Exosquad reboot is because they looked at the two series and saw that Exosquad was just too dark. But when Peacock came around, and the only reason why they call it Peacock is because of NBC, cried like bitches about it. By the way, Peacock is basically Sky streaming service, that Sky streaming service that's in all the other countries like EU and all that. It was supposed to be the US version, but it got named to Peacock instead. But as of right now, Exosquad is really just a placeholder thrown into the kids department because someone said, it looks like cartoon, just throw it in there. Just like the melting faces, the blob beating the shit out of people, suffocating two people to death.
This is Hallas. The Neo-Mega prisoner has escaped. He may be dangerous. Class 1 alert is now in effect.
And also forgetting that it can disguise itself and make itself appear like anybody. Fun times. And like I said, it's now in the Peacock's kids section because they're stupid. That's it. See ya.